ancient city of Chester has its origins in the 1st century. At that time, the Romans established a Roman fortress in the area, known as Castra Diva, and much of the history and architecture has been retained from that time. Throughout the centuries, Chester has evolved to become one of the most popular tourist destinations in England. Ahead is a stretch of the Shropshire Union Canal. However, in medieval times and earlier, it was known as the site of Chester's jousting croft. Additionally, every Sunday after attending church, it was compulsory for the men and boys of the city to gather here in order to improve their archery skills. The Cheshire archers, as they became known, were always in the forefront of the army, and were able to fire a minimum of 12 arrows per minute. At the Battle of Agincourt in the early 15th century, it is said that thousands of the enemy fell in a very short time. As a result, the enemy became so fearful of the archers that if they were ever able to capture one, then they would immediately amputate the first 2 fingers on each hand, thus ensuring that he would never be able to use a bow again. The bowmen retaliated by holding their arms aloft, waving their still existing fingers in the air, resulting, it's said, to the origin of the more unsavoury 2-fingered sign used throughout the world today. Frodsham Street is named after a small Cheshire town, about 9 miles away to the east. In the medieval period, it was known as Cow Lane, because the cattle were driven along here to the markets and the slaughterhouses. Excavations nearby have uncovered a large area of hard-beaten clay ground surrounded by earth banks, which suggests there was a Roman parade ground here about 2,000 years ago. Part of the original Roman fortress walls lies behind the shops to the right. At a break in the buildings ahead on the right, note the freestanding bell tower of the Cathedral which stands along the city wall. Built in 1974, it is named the Adelshaw Tower, after the Dean of the Cathedral of that time. Designed by George Pace, it was the first freestanding bell tower to be built for a cathedral since the 15th century. Shortly, as the bus turns to the left, note the East Gate to the right, and standing proudly above it, Chester's most famous landmark, the East Gate Clock. Built in 1897 to commemorate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, the clock has become a symbol of Chester throughout the world. Nowadays, it is the second most photographed clock in the country, after the Great Clock of Westminster, which houses Big Ben in London. We are now in Foregate Street, the eastern approach to the city. From here, the Romans would have marched eastward to York and southwards to London, by way of Watling Street. Excavations in this area have revealed evidence of a civilian settlement. The civilian population established their trading area here to serve the needs of the Roman legion who lived within the fortress walls. Ahead and to the right is one of Chester's original timber-framed buildings. Built in 1571, it is typical of the architecture of that time, with the first story overhanging the lower and supported by wooden pillars. In earlier centuries, taxes were paid according to the amount of land taken up by the building area, and consequently, properties such as this were built as small as possible at ground level and extended outwards at first floor level as typified here. Obviously, by doing so, large amounts of money were saved, thus making this an early example of tax evasion. We are now at Stop 2, Foregate Street and the Old Queen's Head. A light here for the East Gate Clock, city centre shops and the suburb of Boughton. The Old Queen's Head public house to the left is one of the many black and white timber-framed buildings throughout the city. On one gable, the date is seen as 1508, whilst on the other side it states 1939. During the Civil War in the 17th century, the royal city of Chester was left devastated with many of its buildings left in ruins. Since the Victorian era, the city has been greatly altered, with new buildings being constructed and older ones being heavily restored as seen here. We are now at the bars, an area not actually associated with alcoholic beverages, as the name instantly implies. The famous circuit of walls that we see today wasn't the city's sole defence, and the bar's outer defensive gates stood here to protect the expanding population in the eastern suburbs. During the Civil War in the 17th century, Chester was a royalist stronghold supporting King Charles I, and as a defensive measure against the invading parliamentarian forces, the royalists built earthworks on either side of the gate, thus embracing all the outlying areas. The gate was demolished in 1770, but the name lives on. We are now approaching Stop 3 City Road, a light here for the Premier Inn and other hotels. The canal, look to the right. Beyond the apartments is the 50-metre tall lead shot tower. It was built in 1799, and by 1801 it was manufacturing lead shot or musket balls to be used in the Napoleonic Wars. Workers carried heavy lead ingots to the top of the tower, where they were then heated in crucibles until they became molten liquid. Arsenic was then added as a hardening agent. This deadly concoction was then poured down the tower where it passed through large metal sieves formed globules of lead. It then landed in a bath of water, and when retrieved, they were perfectly spherical lead shot. Even today, it is still considered to be the cheapest and most efficient way to produce shot, but due to the metal's poisonous nature, it is no longer permitted. Before the bus turns to the left, the last building on the right is the Queen Hotel. Built by the railway companies in 1860, it was the most prestigious hotel in the area and was specifically built to accommodate first-class tourists coming into the city via the railway. The main entrance of the Queen Hotel is actually facing the railway station. Above this entrance stands a statue of Queen Victoria, in whose honour the hotel is named. Note behind us the connecting covered walkway leading from the station to the hotel and the sign above the open arch offering carriages and horses for hire. Hotel porters used this walkway to escort guests to and from the station. Many famous guests stayed at the Queen Hotel, such as the actress Lily Langtry, the notorious mistress of Edward VII. Cecil Rhodes, the founder of Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, was said to have plotted the Boer War while strolling through the hotel grounds. In 1867, another distinguished guest was Charles Dickens, the famous writer. Arriving in a very severe winter, Dickens complained about his accommodation, comparing his coldness with a piece of meat in a larder. We are now at Stop 4, Chester Railway Station. A light here for National Rail services, buses towards Chester Zoo, Cheshire Oaks and Liverpool, local hotels and the suburbs of Poole and Newtown. We are now in Station Road, and the railway station is on the right. Thomas Brassey, born locally in 1805, was awarded the contract to construct the building. Although not well publicised, he actually became the most prolific railway builder of the Victorian times. When Thomas Brassey died in 1870, such was the magnitude of his work, he left £3.2 million, a vast amount of money in those days. The foundation stone for the station was laid in August 1847, and the grand opening took place on August the 1st, 1848, which meant that it took less than a year to reach completion, an extraordinary achievement. Fashionable London architect Francis Thompson designed the building in the elegant Italian style, and the station laid claim to the longest facade in the country when it was built, 1,110 feet long. We now enter Brook Street, and the small building at the end of the road on the right opened as a cocoa house in the Victorian period. As we pass the building, look above the ground floor window where a decorative sign can be seen declaring that the building was owned by the Chester Cocoa House Company Limited. Cocoa houses were built by members of the Temperance Society to combat the scourge of alcohol amongst the poor. It was hoped they would draw the attention from the 365 pubs that existed in the city at that time. So cheap was alcohol, it was said you could get drunk for a penny and dead drunk for tuppence. It is interesting to note that the powerful Quaker chocolate manufacturers, such as Cadbury, Rowntree and Fry, were all members of the Temperance Society. So maybe it could be said there was method in their madness. Entering Poole Way, we can see directly ahead of us Chester's imposing cathedral. In approximately 660 AD, a small Saxon timber church dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul was founded here by King Wulfhere, father of St. Werburgh. St. Werburgh was born in the 7th century, and she became a revered nun in the Saxon kingdom of Mercia. After her death in 706, her remains were buried in Handbridge, Staffordshire. In the latter half of the 9th century, Vikings were raiding the country, and in order to protect the saints' relics from the marauding Danes, they were brought here to the church within the fortified walls. A shrine built to house the relics still stands in the cathedral today. Major changes occurred on the site after the Battle of Hastings in 1066. William the Conqueror gave Chester into the hands of his nephew, Hugh d'Avranches, better known as Hugh the Wolf. Granting him the earldom of Chester, Hugh later founded a Benedictine abbey here. In the 16th century, Henry VIII came to the throne, and to solve his marital and financial problems, he broke from the Church of Rome and created himself head of the Church of England. In 1540, he sacked and closed most of the abbeys in England. Fortunately, the Abbey Church in Chester was saved, and it became the Anglican cathedral in the newly created Diocese of Chester. In 1541, it was rededicated to Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary. To the right, Chester's 3 super trees, as they are known, can be seen in the sunken roundabout garden. Built in 2019, climbing plants will eventually cover the 7-metre high structures in order to give them the more authentic, natural appearance of real trees. The area has been designed to create a habitat for plants and wildlife to flourish. This environmental project to combat air pollution was inspired by David Attenborough's TV programme, Planet Earth. We are now travelling along St. Oswald's Way, and as we cross over the canal, the building on the left is the Mill Hotel, which was originally constructed as a grain mill to process flour. Built in the 1830s, it was known as Griffith's Mill, and in earlier times, the canal side would have been lined with buildings such as this. The canal provided the transportation system for the movement of the grain and flour. When the corn industry declined, the building was used as a warehouse until it was converted into a hotel in 1986. The buildings with tall chimney stacks to the right, known as Parker's buildings, now comprise of 30 apartments. They were built in 1889 to John Douglas's design, and were named after Cecil Parker, the first Duke of Westminster's land agent. The buildings were designed based on the new-style tenement buildings in London, considered to be the best form of social housing at that time. The facilities included inside toilets and running water, items that were unheard of amongst the working classes of the day. The Duke, who was a benevolent employer, accommodated his retired estate workers here. The red brick building directly ahead was built in the Dutch design by John Douglas. Above the top row of large windows, the building date 1884 can be seen moulded into the Flemish-style gabled brickwork. For many years, this building was used as Chester's first police headquarters until a more modern building replaced it in the 1980s. Ahead on the right is the Church of St. Werburgh, considered to be the present-day Roman Catholic Cathedral. Designed by the Liverpool architect Edmund Kirby and built in light grey stone, it was commissioned in 1873, although the building work was only completed in 1914. The small building on the left is Grosvenor Park Lodge, which was built as the park keeper's residence in the 19th century. Constructed of stone at ground level with carved half-timbering on the upper floor, it is the first known use of black and white timber framing by the architect John Douglas. The building to the right with the ornate barley sugar-style chimney stacks is the Victorian public swimming baths. Built by John Douglas, the chimney stacks are a favourite design of his and can be spotted throughout the city and its suburbs. Built in a mixture of red brick and mock Tudor style in 1900, it still serves today as a swimming pool for local swimming clubs and schools. On the left is Grosvenor Park. Richard Grosvenor, the second Marquess of Westminster, gave this 20 acres of land to the citizens of Chester to provide them with a park for their recreation. The Marquess paid for the design and laying out of the park, and to show their gratitude, local citizens contributed around £5,000 for a marble statue of the Marquess, which can still be seen in the park today. We are now at Stop 5, Vickers Lane. A light here for the Roman Amphitheatre, Grosvenor Park, the Roman Gardens, and St. John the Baptist Church. St. John the Baptist Church is on the left. Evidence suggests that in 689 AD, a Saxon minster was founded here, and parts of the present building date back to the Norman period, at which point it became the Cathedral of the Diocese of Mercia for the next 27 years. The church lost its cathedral status in 1102, eventually becoming a parish church in the 16th century. Part of the east end of the chancel fell out of use, and following the truncation of the north and south transepts, the building is now 1/3 of its original size. Today, the external appearance is a result of Victorian restoration work carried out in the 1860s. St. John's is still in use today and is always open to visitors. Ahead on the left is Chester's famous Roman amphitheatre, where it was built in a commanding position on the southeastern side of the fortress. Archaeological evidence suggests that the first amphitheatre was built around 80 AD, later to be replaced by a larger, monumental stone structure. The outer walls reached 40 feet, twice the height of the city walls seen ahead, and provided seating capacity for approximately 7,000 people. Recent excavations revealed the outer walls of the two structures. The modern low sandstone walls rest on top of the original walls buried beneath them. The large mural on the rear wall creates the illusion of how the total amphitheatre would have appeared in Roman times. It is the largest stone amphitheatre built in Roman Britain and is known as the Lost Colosseum. We are now about to enter Suitors Lane. Please be aware that tree branches may occasionally overhang the bus. Suitor is the old word for a shoemaker, and anyone who worked with leather had their tanneries in this area. We shall soon be arriving at the River Dee, where leather workers needed the continual supplies of river water to treat their hides and skins. We are approaching stop 6, the Groves. Alight here for river trips, riverside walks and boat hire. The river trip takes half an hour, and upon your return, another tour bus will arrive to take you on with the rest of your tour. If you have not already purchased a half-hour river cruise ticket, if you have a 24-hour ticket, you can upgrade your ticket with the driver, who will be happy to give advice and save you money. 2-hour cruise tickets are also available on a seasonal basis, so if you are interested, please speak to one of the boat staff on the quayside for further information. Those passengers with a Chester in an hour ticket who boarded at a different stop should remain on the bus, as your ticket will not be valid if you try to reboard. This area is known as the Groves and was laid out by the Victorians and soon became their favourite meeting place. Charles Brown, the owner of the prestigious Brown's department store, was responsible for planting the grove of lime trees along the riverfront, thus giving the area its name. It is still as popular today with the locals as it was in the 19th century, and many events take place on the River Dee. The source of the river is just to the west of Lake Bala in North Wales. It then flows north-eastwards, passing through the beautiful Dee Valley, then through Chester and onwards to the Irish Sea. This stretch of the river is used mainly for leisure purposes today, so it's hard to believe that the river itself was one of the main reasons for the Romans building their fortress here, because it enabled them to establish a thriving commercial port which existed until the 18th century. Chester's famous zoo is situated just a few miles from the city centre in the suburb of Upton. The founder, George Mottershead, visited a zoo in Manchester when he was a young boy in 1903. As an animal lover, he was horrified to see all the animals kept in cages, and it fueled his concept of building a zoo without bars. He eventually bought land and a run-down property near Chester called Oakfield. George and his family worked hard to build up the zoo and help realise his dream. Moats, ditches and grassy woodlands were created to protect the public instead of the traditional but rather inhumane wrought iron bars. Although there was great opposition from local residents, the zoo was finally opened to the public in 1931. Set in lovely grounds, the zoo's land area and species of animals have greatly increased over the years, thus enabling their important conservation work to continue. Take a trip into the twilight zone to see the bats. Take a photo with a Sumatran tiger and get up close and personal with snow leopards. Often rated as the best zoo in the UK and one of the best in the world, it is a worthwhile visit during your stay. Chester Zoo is easily accessible from the city centre by using the Stagecoach bus services 1 and X1 to Liverpool. Buses run every 20 minutes Monday to Sunday daytime. You can board these services at Chester Bus Interchange and Chester Railway Station. Timetable information can be found online on our website or on our mobile bus app. Behind to retrace our way up Suitors Lane. Between the city walls and the low boundary wall to the left is what is known as the Roman Gardens. Although it certainly wasn't a garden in Roman times, it was developed in the 1940s to display some of the many Roman artefacts that have been found around the city during excavations. A fine view of the gardens can be seen as we turn left at the top of the road. pass through the eastern wall by way of the New Gate. This modern gate was designed by Sir Walter Tapper and built in 1938. Immediately to its right, dating from the medieval period, sits the original gate, known as the Pepper Gate or the Wolf Gate. By the 1930s, with increasing traffic on the road, severe congestion occurred under the tiny archway, resulting in the newer, wider bridge being built. We are now in Pepper Street, which is where in medieval times the spice merchants once lived and worked. Prior to this, the southerly wall of the Roman fortress would have been on the right. Today there are restaurants, shops and the modern indoor Grosvenor shopping centre. We are now at Stop 7 Pepper Street. A light here for the city centre, the Rose, the Diva Roman Centre and the Chester Cross. In the pedestrianised part of Chester, ahead on the right, there's an area known as the Cross where the city's four main streets converge. An intersection has existed here since the Roman occupation in the 1st century AD. Bridge Street, Watergate Street and Eastgate Street all follow the course of the original Roman roads. Only Northgate Street at the southern end is post-Roman, resulting in the staggered crossroads that we see today. The name of this important area of the city dates back to the medieval period, where the high cross built of local red sandstone was erected in the 14th century. In 1646, during the English Civil War, the cross was demolished after the surrender of Chester to the parliamentarians. Some of the original fragments of stone were discovered in the 19th century and incorporated into the restoration. In 1975, the high cross was returned to its original medieval position. Ahead on the left is the old Falcon Inn. In earlier times it was the townhouse of the wealthy Grosvenor family. As they do today, and as they have done for centuries, they lived on their estate outside the walls. By the 1970s the building was in a dilapidated state, and the late 6th Duke, Gerald Grosvenor, carried out restoration work on the building for which in 1983 he received an award for his efforts. We are now at Stop 8, Grosvenor Street. A light here for the Rose, the Grosvenor and Military Museums, and Chester Castle. Ahead on the left is the Grosvenor Museum, which was built in 1886. The museum is named after Hugh Grosvenor, the first Duke of Westminster, who donated the land and also subscribed £4,000 towards the building costs. The museum contains numerous galleries and exhibits, including the award-winning Roman Stones Gallery, which features the largest collection of Roman headstones in the country. With free admission, it's a must-see attraction. On the left, at the roundabout ahead, is Chester's more modern castle. It was designed in the classical style by the architect Thomas Harrison. Building work commenced in 1788, but because it took another 34 years to complete, Harrison built a home here to enable him to supervise the work. Today it houses the Military Museum and the Crown Courts where many famous trials have taken place. Chester's famous racecourse can be seen ahead on the right. Horse racing began here in 1539, officially making it the oldest racecourse in the world. Before racing took place, the area was a sports ground of sorts. Centuries ago, this is where the apprentices of the craftsmen's guilds played football, but sad to say, even in those times, the games had to be abandoned due to spectator violence. Prior to this, the area was a water meadow, and as the high tides of the river came in, the area would flood. However, all that was left in the centre of the flooded area was a small island with a sandstone cross upon it. The old word for cross was rude, and one of the old words for an island was an eve, and consequently, that's how the racecourse came by by the name it's known as today, the Rudi, or the Isle of the Cross. As well as a very full racing calendar commencing in May, the area hosts many other events throughout the season. These include show jumping, football and polo matches. There is also an exciting Roman day with chariot racing, various concerts and exhibitions, and the season ends with a spectacular fireworks display in November. Beyond the roundabout, ahead on the left past the car park, you can see some ornate wrought iron gates. These highlight just one of the original entrances to the 10,000-acre Eton Hall estate, home to the Duke of Westminster and the Grosvenor family since the 1400s. The bus is now in an area known as Handbridge, one of the oldest suburbs of the city. To both left and right is Overley Cemetery, developed by the Victorians in the 19th century. There is a section of war graves on the right, and many of Chester's famous dignitaries lie at rest to the left. Overley Cemetery opened in 1850 and is the resting place of many interesting characters. One such character was Edward Langtry, who died in Chester in 1897. He was the husband of the notorious London actress, Lily Langtry, who was the mistress of King Edward VII. The only mourners at Edward's funeral were his brother and sister. Lily, of course, was absent, but she did send some flowers. Mary and Gilroy Finney, who were the king and queen of the Romany gypsies, are buried here. It is a tradition in gypsy folklore that every time they pass a royal grave, they pay homage by placing flowers. Mary Jonas died when she was 85 and was buried here in 1899. Mary had 33 children, which included 15 sets of boy-girl twins, the highest number ever recorded, and consequently, this event has its place in the Guinness Book of Records. The ladies on the bus might like to know that Mary never ever suffered from that dreaded female complaint, the headache. In the 19th century, Handbridge became known as the Duke's Village. At that time, the first Duke, Hugh Lucas Grosvenor, set about building many of his estate workers' homes here. Look for the decorative houses coming into view on the left, which carry a blue-black diamond pattern in the brickwork. Fashionable in Tudor times, it was revived by the Victorians. The Duke employed this style in many of his brick properties because it appeared to portray lots of interwoven W's, thus highlighting the Westminster title. So delighted with his elevation to the dukedom that he emblazoned the pattern on numerous buildings across the city and beyond. The Grade II listed church known as St Mary's without the walls can be seen to the left. It was consecrated in 1887, replacing the Church of St Mary's on the hill, which stands within the city walls. The first Duke of Westminster paid for the parish church to be built, so that his employees who lived in the village had a place of worship. The Romans quarried vast amounts of sandstone in the Handbridge area. Ahead on the left is an area of parkland known as Edgar's Field. Two large outcrops of the exposed quarry face can still be seen, and carved into one of the faces of the rock is a Roman shrine, dedicated to the goddess Minerva. According to legend, King Edgar, the first king of all England, had a palace here. When he visited this site in the 10th century, 8 vassal kings rowed him up the river to St John's Church and then back again, to show their allegiance to him. The bus now crosses the river via the old Deep Bridge. It has been established that a Roman ford once crossed here, and several wooden bridges stood here before the present stone bridge was built in the 13th century. To the right is Chester's Weir, which was built in the 11th century by Hugh Lupus, the first Norman earl, who owned the Dee Mills which once stood on the riverbank to the left of the bridge gate ahead. The water from the weir provided the necessary power to turn the mill wheel. The bridge gate itself was designed by Joseph Turner and was built in 1782 to replace the medieval gate that once stood here. Immediately after the bridge gate and on the left is the Bear and Billet pub, which bears the date 1664. It was the last large black and white timber-framed building to be built in the city before newer brick buildings were introduced. The building is known for its large expanse of 1,600 tiny windows and was originally built as a townhouse for the Earls of Shrewsbury, who were custodians of the bridge gate. On the left, at first floor level, on top of the shops, is a group of houses known as Gamel Terrace. The last house of the terrace is Gamel House. King Charles I is said to have stayed here as a guest after his defeat at the Battle of Roton Moor, before making his escape to freedom into Wales. We are now at Stop 10 Lower Bridge Street, a light here for the Chester Rose and the Diva Roman Discovery Centre. On the left, and said to be one of the most haunted pubs in the country, the Old King's Head Hotel was built in 1622 as the Chester home of the Randall Hume family. They were wealthy merchants and constructed this lovely Grade 2 listed building out of second-hand ships' timbers that they acquired from the old port of Chester. Could this have been done for economy, or was it that the Randall Hume family were pioneers of recycling? That is so important today. Ahead on the right is the old Tudor house, and as can be seen, it leans very severely to one side. This is reputed to have occurred during the Civil War of the 17th century, when the building is said to have been struck by cannonballs fired by the invading parliamentarians who were very close to the city. Most people today suggest that it is due to old age, as the building displays the impressive date on its front of 1503 AD. In the northern wing of the castle, is home to the 22nd Cheshire Regiment. The regiment was raised in 1689 on the Rudi, the site of Chester's racecourse, but sadly in 2007 they were amalgamated with the Worcester and Staffordshire regiments to become the Merseyside Regiment. Turns right at the roundabout. Note the large circular building. The site was previously occupied by the Cheshire County Police Headquarters. The new building, built in 2010, is still known as HQ and houses a hotel, restaurants and bars, offices and private residences. The modern architecture has been thoughtfully designed in the form of a Roman Colosseum and has already received a prestigious award. Entering Nicholas Street, immediately on the right is Chester's modern Magistrates' Court. Designed by the Cheshire County Architects Department, it was built in 1991 in the style of a Roman villa. It was given a civic award in 1995 for blending a fine example of modern architecture into a historic site. Of Georgian townhouses ahead on the left were built in the 1780s. Designed by Joseph Turner in the fashionable London style, it is the longest example of this type of property remaining in Chester. Similar properties, which used to stand on the right, were demolished in the 1960s to make way for the inner ring road. In the 19th century, the houses were mainly occupied by doctors who lived and practiced here, and hence the local people of the day nicknamed the street Bulldogs Coal Mine. Turning left into the lower part of Watergate Street, take note of the fine black and white half-timbered building on the left, known as Stanley Palace. It was built in 1591 to be the townhouse of the Stanleys, a prominent Cheshire family. The three inner gables belonged to the original house, but by the mid-19th century were in a state of disrepair. Given over to the city, it was restored in the 1930s, where a fourth new gable at the street edge was added. Continue through the western wall via the Watergate. Similarly to the Bridge Gate, it was designed by the architect Joseph Turner and was built in 1788. As the name suggests, it leads through to the old port area of the city, where the River Dee flowed close to the city walls. We are now at stop 12 New Crane Street, a light here for the racecourse entrance and the Holiday Inn Express Hotel. We are now in Crane Street, and this historic part of the city is known as the Old Port area, where the Romans established a thriving commercial port nearly 2,000 years ago. The Crane Wharves were situated just outside the Watergate and ran along the westerly city wall. In 1558, Chester's port was recorded as second only to Bristol, as the leading port on the western coast of England. The gradual silting up of the river in the Middle Ages made the port difficult to use, and large vessels were eventually unable to reach Chester. In 1745, a new port area, New Crane Wharf, was established, enabling ships of up to 200 tons to reach the city. The complete decline and closure of the port took place in the 18th century. On the left can be seen an example of Chester's more recent architecture. Built in the shape of a sailing ship, it is known by the locals as Noah's Ark and was built to be Chester's new scout headquarters. In total contrast on the right is the old water tower, which was built in 1322 at a cost of £100. It was built for two reasons: firstly to provide extra defence to the city, and secondly to provide moorings for the larger ships unable to reach the harbour. It is said that the tower was built by the women of Chester, whilst the men were away fighting. The local women of today say smugly, that's obviously the reason why it's still in such great shape today. Turning right, the Shropshire Union Canal and Tower Wharf are on the left. Ahead are three black and white staircase locks that were hewn out of solid rock in order to provide the ways and means of lowering barges some 33 feet between the upper canal and the lower canal basin. These locks, together with the canal basin, were designed by Thomas Telford, the famous engineer. Construction started on the Chester Canal in 1772, but due to financial and engineering difficulties, Chester had to wait another 25 years before it became an important canal port. After the demise of Chester's river port, the canal system provided Chester with essential trade links with the Port of Liverpool and the National Canal Network. was originally built in 1717 as the Bluecoat School. It was founded by Nicholas Stratford, Bishop of Chester, as a charitable school for the education of poor boys. Just before we go under the north gate, look to the right, and you will see a small stone bridge crossing over the canal. This is known as the Bridge of Sighs. It was a crossing that originally led from Northgate Jail on the left to the chapel in the Bluecoat School on the right. Hauntingly, it was built to allow condemned prisoners to travel between the two, to receive their last rites before being sent for execution. Chez Jewel, the modern restaurant to the right, has something of a fiery history. This was originally Chester's purpose-built fire station operating from 1911 to 1971. It then became a court of law, and in 1997 was transformed into the restaurant we see today. Ahead on the right, look out for the magnificent Chester Town Hall. Finally completed in 1869, the 160-foot-tall building was officially opened by the future King Edward VII and cost £40,000 to build. The building still to this day remains a centre of activity for many civic events, royal visits and ceremonial occasions. Adjacent to the town hall, you will find the famous Chester Cathedral, so this is the perfect chance to alight the bus at the next stop and explore the architecture of these historic buildings. We are now at stop 13, Hunter Street. A light here for Chester Cathedral, the Town Hall and the New Market. An unusual aircraft that can be frequently seen flying over Chester is known locally as the Beluga, as it resembles the shape of a beluga whale. Based at the Airbus factory just across the border in North Wales, the aircraft was specifically designed to transport manufactured aircraft wings to various factories in France and Germany, where the final assemblies are carried out. A confusing sight in the sky when you identify it for the first time, so do keep an eye out for it. Excavations to the west of the town hall in 1939 revealed 1st century walls and 3rd century paving. Further excavations on the same site in the 1960s revealed the remains of a huge oval building with 12 wedge-shaped rooms. A lead water pipe feeding a fountain monument in the courtyard dates from the first half of 79 AD. The purpose of the elliptical building has remained a mystery, but no other building remotely like it has been found in any other Roman fortress. As the bus leaves the stop, look to the right. The building, which was remodeled in 2017 and formally opened by the late Queen Elizabeth II, is now known as the Story House. Previously the city's Odeon Cinema, the new building now houses a restaurant, city library, theatre and a newly updated cinema. A great place to meet friends and family and see a much-loved show. As we approach the traffic lights, the building directly in front of us is the old Chester Royal Infirmary, used as the primary hospital in the city for many years. The building was founded in the mid-18th century and is recorded in the National Heritage List for England as a Grade 2 listed building. The building was closed in December 1995 and patients moved to the newer Countess of Chester Hospital just up the road. It has now been redeveloped for apartments and housing. known as the Gateway to North Wales, with the border about 2 miles away, and to the left, if weather allows, a fine view of the Welsh hills can be seen far away in the distance. The relationship between the Welsh and English hasn't always been as friendly as it is today. In the late 13th century, Edward I made Chester Castle the base for his campaigns in Wales. During the following century, Owain Glyndwr's rebellion put Chester in real danger. In 1403, Prince Henry, who later became Henry V, made a proclamation that if any Welsh person were found inside the city walls after sunset, would have their heads cut off. Up to now, no decapitations have been recorded, though any Welsh person on board the bus best be aware that the law has never ever been repealed. Chester's Fountains Roundabout can be seen directly ahead of us. During its construction, the discovery here of many Roman headstones and tombs showed the area to have once been a Roman burial ground. The legions of Rome always buried their dead well away from their fortresses, because being a pagan people and believing in ghosts and evil spirits, they certainly wouldn't have wanted any such visitations whilst in their beds at night. Turning right at the bottom of Delamere Street, the city northern wall is directly ahead. 13 courses of the Roman wall have survived here, and is one of the finest examples of a Roman fortress wall in northern Europe. As we turn left into Gorse Stacks, the northern wall is on the right. On top of the wall is King Charles Tower. In September 1645, it is said that King Charles I stood on top of this tower to see his defeated army returning from the Battle of Rotten Moor. The name Gorse Stacks derives from the Middle Ages, when city bakers used wild gorse in the baking of bread. A prickly shrub, gorse could be collected freely on heathland surrounding the city. When dried, it was found to make excellent tinder to fire the bakers' ovens. However, in 1666, the Great Fire of London is said to have started in a baker's shop in Pudding Lane. Concerned for the safety of residents inside the city walls, local dignitaries demanded that all gorse should in future be stacked outside the eastern wall, resulting in the name still in use today.